Can you lay out
Morning.
for everyone just how acute the issue is in terms of the necessity for the government to step in and offer a bailout for some of these suppliers now?
Yeah, it is very acute. I mean, gas prices are much higher than they would normally be. They're spiking because of global movements in gas markets. It's not really the UK that's driven those prices high. It's high demand, particularly in the Far East, some restrictions in supply in Europe, etc. So it is causing a problem. I mean, there's probably two types of problem. One is for small gas suppliers because they've bought a lot of their gas a lot cheaper. They're subject to a government price cap. So when prices are high, they simply can't make the numbers work. And then the second is the knock-on effect on some other industries, heavy industries which rely on gas, where the short-term spike in prices is affecting their production.
Jim, good morning. It's Manus. I'm in Dubai. We've got a lot of solar, we've got a lot of oil, and we don't typically have a crisis. This is on the front pages, Jim. We're just showing our viewers. Crisis, what crisis? Energy firms in gas crisis. This is the front pages of the British media. So the question is this: what or to what extent do you think the British government will step in? I look at the Italians; they're stepping in with $3.5 billion. Some would say the energy market was deregulated in the United Kingdom to provide a whole plethora of players. But here we are in a crisis. What help can and should this government do for these providers?
I think, the first instinct for government would be to think actually about consumers rather than the providers. So thinking about particularly those people on lower incomes, facing a winter heating season that's about to start quite soon and high bills. And of course, industrial users that are using a lot of gas, the energy intensive companies. I think, the smaller companies, the small suppliers in the market, I mean, there are mechanisms in place if they do go bust to protect consumers. I think government's going to be quite wary about stepping in because, where do you stop? If you start saving suppliers, there's 55 in the market at the moment. Where do they actually stop? And they may want to show that actually the market works. And sometimes, clearly you can't just bail companies out. You've actually got to let the market work. And for some companies, perhaps, unfortunately, to fail.
Jim, if I can put it just very plainly, do I, as a consumer, as an everyday person, do I need to be prepared to start to pay higher energy prices from this?
I think so, yes. I mean, if this is an extremely short-term phenomenon, as I say, a householder, you probably wouldn't notice because spikes like this can be smoothed out. But this is a sustained rise, and it's not likely to abate very soon. And prices have already started to rise for consumers. So that is going to happen. Clearly, the price cap is in place and it's doing its work, but there may be pressure to, make the price cap higher. So there is going to be pressure on consumer bills over this winter.
And by the way, to your point, Jim, if you run a business and you don't hedge, perhaps it is your own singular responsibility that you don't hedge in a capped market. That will bolster the argument that you've just said, which is where do you stop? What I want to extrapolate from you is everybody's talking, we're going to Glasgow. I'm not. The world is going to Glasgow for COP26. The momentum is shifting. With this crisis, with this real crisis, companies going under, consumers under pressure, do you think it will move the pace of our energy mix in the United Kingdom faster towards renewable? You've given me the numbers. A third is renewable, 15 to 20% is nuclear, and we import. So will this accelerate a transformation?
I hope it will. I mean, the transformation in electricity is already accelerated in the last 5 to 10 years in the UK. So those figures you just quoted are a result of that. The renewable share is going to increase more. The nuclear share is going to fall, but then we'll recover a bit because we're constructing new. But gas is still around half of our electricity quite a lot of the time. So, that does need to go further. I think this will focus minds on that. I think it hopefully will focus minds on things like, upgrading our poor building stock in the UK, particularly homes, which are in many cases poorly insulated. And clearly one reason people worry about high prices of gas is that if you're spending a lot of energy to heat your home in winter, then an increase in the price of gas is going to have a big effect. If your home is better insulated, that increase in the price of gas is going to have much less effect. So I do hope, other than the carbon imperative, which is really, really strong, we have to reduce emissions. These kind of prices are just going to help accelerate that change. And that's what I hope to hear from the government, as well as whatever they have to do to deal with the very short term and acute issues that some are facing.
And at the same time, we're seeing the U.S. setting a goal of 2035 for net zero. Are these goals that are being laid out in the current pace of how the transition is looking, are they obtainable?
I think they're definitely obtainable. There are questions about whether they're ambitious enough. I mean, in particular, the question of China is hanging over the preparation for the summit at the moment because we haven't seen any detail on their plans. I think the big issue, certainly in the UK and for some other countries, is having set targets, for some way in the future, carbon neutrality by 2050, for example. Really, you have to demonstrate in the next few years, are you on the pathway to that target? So for me, I'll be looking at what are the plans in the next few years to really keep reducing emissions rather than higher targets for some far off date in the future. And that's where I hope the climate talks in November is really going to galvanize action.